Will this end up being an issue for Georgia in the long run in 2025? And that issue is the youth of the team, the inexperience on this roster. When you think about Georgia's teams the last few seasons, there was a ton of snaps. There were a lot of older players that found a lot of success. And Georgia as a program obviously found a ton of success. You see that typically with national championship teams. They're not usually super young. And you can see that on the basketball scale too. March Madness is going on. Teams that have older players that have been around for a while typically go pretty far in the tournament. Same thing goes for football. And Kirby seems to me to be a little bit concerned about the youth of this team. We talked to Kirby and we talked to 7 different players the other night, 7 guys that are considered older on the team. Here's the thing. 2 of them aren't older. They're guys that, one of them's Nate Frazier, who hasn't been at Georgia for a full calendar year. He didn't enroll early last year. And the other is KJ Bolden, who started most of those games last year, pretty much all those games last year, and he's entering year 2. So, I mean, Georgia's team is younger. And they've got guys that are going to be stepping up who are in year 2, year 3. There's not as many fourth-year guys. Why? Well, a lot of them have gone to the draft, or they've transferred out, or, sometimes there's just a lot of transition on these rosters. Ryan Killer from Dawg Post, is this going to be a problem? Is this going to be a problem? I think back to 2021 Georgia. I've said multiple times we don't want to think back too much to that, but it's a good blueprint for success. And college football's changed, and we'll get to that point too. But I think back to 2021 Georgia, and I'm thinking back, and I'm like, well, they had a ton of impact guys. Who really, really mattered? Well, on offense, Stetson Bennett had been around a long time. All right, he maybe didn't play a ton for Georgia at that point, but this is a guy who was around in 2017, had been all over the place, and ends up back at Georgia. Zamir White and James Cook, seniors on that team, guys who have been in the program for a long time and understood kind of what it takes to win. Kyrus Jackson was a little bit older as a wide receiver. John Fitzpatrick, another older guy on that offense. Jamari Salyer had played a lot of snaps, right? Justin Schaefer had played a lot of snaps on that offensive line. You flip it over, and it's easy to think about that 2021 defense. You think about Devontae Wyatt, who had been around a lot. Jordan Davis, who was older. Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker are juniors who had played a ton. In the linebacker room, you had Nakobe Dean, a Butkus Award winner. Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, guys who had been around for a few years, waited their turn. Darian Kendrick, a guy who went to Clemson and then transferred over to Georgia. Christopher Smith was a little bit older, right? So you go through that list, and they just, most of that roster was just older and had a ton of experience. In 2022, it's kind of the same thing. Stetson's a year older. Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker are a year older. Kenny McIntosh, the main running back, he's a senior. It was all over those defenses. Christopher Smith on the defense side of the ball, he's a year older. So a ton of experience. And that experience, I think, matters a lot. When I look at 2025 and you start to project this year's roster, well, a lot of those guys obviously have been gone, but Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, guys who had been, main pieces for the team for 3 seasons, they're not around. Dan Jackson, a guy who was around for both national championships, gone. Right? Smile Munden, a guy who started for 3 years, gone. So on the defensive side of the ball, it's a lot younger. You've got the linebacker room that's got some guys that are in year 3. Dalen Everett, year 4. Christian Miller, year 4, but isn't a guy that's been an impact guy for a long time on the defensive line. So when you look at the defense, it's pretty inexperienced comparatively speaking to some of Georgia's really, really good teams that went really far. When you flip it around and look at the offensive side of the ball, Nate Frazier seems to be RB1. Well, it's year 2 for him. For running backs, maybe it doesn't matter quite as much, maybe. And I think he'll take a step forward. But whoever starts a quarterback for Georgia either has 1 or no starts. Because it'll be Gunnar Stockton most likely, who's played, 2+ football games combined when you think about all of his experience over the last couple of seasons. So you're not getting a veteran quarterback who's played in a ton of games, which we know matters a lot. Not that he can't be successful. I think that the Gunner certainly can be successful. And if somehow Ryan Puglisi does end up winning that job, we're talking about a guy entering year 2 who I don't think has gotten on the field at all yet. So he'd be getting his first on-field experience there. So yes, this is a situation that is not as ideal when you look at it. Georgia's receivers are new to the program. That matters to Kirby. I think this is a year where you'll see a couple of freshmen at least be in the rotation. You kind of see that every year. Last year you saw KJ Bolden, you saw Chris Cole, you saw Nate Frazier, right? True freshmen making an impact. This year, I think you could see Elijah Griffin on the defensive line kind of rotate in. I think you could see Isaiah Gibson be one of the main edge rushers for Georgia this season. I think in the defensive back room, you might get a Todd Robinson or somebody, or a Zion Branch who is new to the program. So there's going to be a lot of new for Georgia and inexperience. Is that going to hurt Georgia? Is it going to make things take a while to get going? Here's the thing. When you look at Georgia's schedule, and I'm going to go off rough memory because I don't want to take the time to bring it up, but you got a couple of smaller, pay-to-play types of schools you can deal with. That's great. I think for this particular Georgia team, it's good that Georgia's starting out with that and not with a Clemson. But then in week 3, week 4, it's in September, they're gonna have to go up to Knoxville and play Tennessee in what is one of the most hostile environments in college football. And it's going to be a good Tennessee team who has a quarterback that now has a year of experience under his belt. They're going through their own turnover, so I don't know exactly what Tennessee's situation will be at that point. I don't know if they'll be quite as good, but all those young guys are going to get a taste of that real fast after they get acclimated for the first couple of weeks against schools they should handle in Sanford Stadium. So that's going to happen. And then, Alabama's going to roll in. Ole Miss is going to roll in. They're going to have to deal with Kentucky. They're going to have to deal with all these schools. Eventually Texas, who has Arch Manning and has a lot of excitement and a lot of talent that can match up with Georgia's, they're going to roll in. And there's not going to be a ton of players that have been in all these moments. Oscar Delp is one of them. Dalen Everett is one of them. At this point, Monroe Freeling is one of them, a guy that's probably going to start for Georgia on the offensive line. They've been in these big moments. Lawson Lucky's been in some big moments, right? He's entering year 3, and year 3 guys are definitely considered older, but when Kirby is sitting around and telling us, hey, not sitting around, Kirby doesn't do a lot of that. He's always grinding for Georgia, but when you think, hey, he's considering KJ Bolden and Nate Frazier and some of these year 2 guys to be older players on the team, and when he says, I look around and I ask how many of y'all have been through 3 springs, and only a handful of guys raise their hand. Yeah, Georgia's youth and inexperience may show at some points this season. Now, they could be really good. I'm not saying that these aren't really good football players, but they haven't played as many significant snaps as most of these Georgia teams had. You'll see the offensive line has only a couple guys who have done that, and that's because of the way Georgia runs its offensive line and rotates. You'll see on the defensive line, Christian Miller has played a lot. But outside of that, that's not going to be the case for Georgia. And then the secondary, you'll have Dalen Everett and KJ Bolden. But outside of that, you'll have 3 guys out there that just haven't played significant snaps. So yes, Kirby does seem concerned. He's very excited. He's optimistic because of how good the players are, and he knows what they're capable of doing. But it's definitely something that could hurt Georgia in the long run. You think about Ohio State last year, they had a team with a lot of older guys who are now in the NFL or in the draft process. Michigan had a ton of that. You see all the NFL talent that leaves, and obviously those Georgia teams, Alabama in 2020, LSU 2019, championship teams usually have older guys, and it goes across all sports. Georgia's not going to have that as much. Is that going to hurt the Dogs in the long run? Long run is my question. Thanks for watching.